Hey, Horrorheads. Welcome to a new horror-themed podcast discussing all the cool new upcoming horror projects from around the world. From Canada, I'm Ken of the Dead, and with me from the US is Gigi.
Hi, everybody.
From Brazil, we got Jarvis.
What up, y'all?
From Scotland, we've got Jasper.
Hi.
From the US, we have our man C.
Hey, everyone.
And all the way from Germany, we have Lena.
Hello, guys.
And this is the Cold Dead Hard Horror Show. So this is our show zero, basically just to let you guys know what we're all about, a bit about us, and how we plan on doing things. Really just a long promo to give you a taste of our personalities, and hopefully you'll all come back and join us for this wicked little ride. Firstly, we're not critics. Movies are hard to make, books are hard to write, games are hard to develop. We appreciate everything horror. So you won't hear us bashing much, but you will hear us praising everything that we like. We're going to be giving you a quick little rundown of all the top horror news of the month, hopefully every month. New horror movies in production and coming soon, new horror books and comics that are dropping, new horror games in development and release dates, as well as new horror collectibles hitting the market. We'll wrap every show up with a little horror roundtable discussion. This could be anything from interviews with indie horror creators or just us chit-chatting about obscure horror stuff. Gonna be fun. Without further ado, let's meet the cast. Hey Gigi, what got you into horror and what do you love about the genre?
Ken, thanks for the introduction. One of the things that got me into horror is just getting exposed to it as a young kid. I always loved spooky things. I remember the graveyard dance from Fantasia really well from watching it as a child. And I would also stay up late and watch horror movies on TV like Joe Bob's Drive-In when I was like 10. And I've just always been a bit of a horror nerd in all forms.
That was Monster Vision back then, right?
It was what?
Joe Bob's Drive-In? Monster Vision?
Yeah.
It wasn't called Monster Vision back then? Right, the best.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Jasper, what got you into horror and what do you love about the genre?
Oh, since I joined Cold Dead Heart, I've been asked this question a lot, and I actually asked Mom this question, and she said, like, I'd catch pieces of, like, horror movies on the TV before being told to leave because it was too scary. She said, I've always been naturally drawn to the genre. Like, as much as she try and direct me away from it with Disney, I was like, no, I'd rather have Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't want none of this Disney stuff. And again, I've said this before, that the first genuine experience I had with fear and horror was the Blair Witch Project, and I was a kid when I watched that, and it terrified me. And it's like when people do the activities for adrenaline rushes. It's kind of like that with horror. You get your first scare, and you're always looking for the next big scare.
Right. It terrifies you at first, but then you want it again, right?
You want it again, so you watch more and more, and I've watched over 1,000 now and counting, and yeah, I'm always looking for the next big scare, and it's been like that since I was a kid.
I love it. Yeah, your watch list is always super impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, Lena, what got you into horror? What do you love about the genre?
Well, I started with horror at a very young age. I think, as some of you already have stated, I think it's pretty normal to start horror when you're young. Basically, my family set me in front of the TV when I was 4 years old, and they showed me the It miniseries with Tim Curry. And I didn't leave with nightmares. I was just a bit scared of washing my hands after that particular scene. But since then, I've been all around horror. I've been introduced to the monster movies with Godzilla, with King Kong, like the very early movies. by my dad, and we have this tradition to watch movies every year. So it just became part of my life, part of being me. And I really love horror because it's always very creative. There's always some sense of creativity, the practical effects, the crew, how they all work together to make this gruesome movie happen is very fascinating, and
Magic, monster magic.
just this. It feels like family to talk with other horror enthusiasts. God, it's way too late for me. But to talk with people that love horror is the thing I love the most about horror, because there's no your opinion is wrong, really. That's what I love the most, like the way we treat each other. Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Jarvis, what got you into horror and what do you love about it?
Being a very curious young fellow, Like, my parents took me to the video store all the time, and they gave me 100% freedom to pick whatever I wanted from the show. And different from other kids that want to watch Batman Returns for the 100th time again, and I was going to the weird stuff, to the not talked about stuff. And I ended up picking up what a horror there that fascinated me, really. Like, I took all the classics, I watched Hammer films, I watched the more old stuff. And the horror always fascinated me as a child, because I didn't understand how horror worked. I just knew that it did. Can you understand that?
Yeah.
Like, I remember that scene from Nosferatu. I watched Nosferatu when I was very young. And you know that scene when he's coming to Harker and he's walking towards the camera?
Yeah.
And that scene frightened me. I couldn't watch that scene in its entirety. And I couldn't understand why. It's just a guy walking to the camera. Like, why I'm so scared? And this surprise that I felt that way always talked to me a lot. And I think that's why I had a very connection to the genre.
Very cool. All right, C, tell us what got you into horror and what do you love about it?
Oh, well, that's not a difficult answer to question at all, or question to answer at all. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I was staying in my buddy's trailer. Everybody was asleep. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I turned on the TV to try and figure out something to watch. And of course, it was a running marathon of Night of the Living Dead, followed by Dawn of the Dead, followed by Evil Dead. So those 3 movies back to back are one of the experiences in my life that really kind of shaped.
That's some experience, man.
It shaped my introduction into the genre. What it did, though, was it kind of jaded my perspective, because for a very, very long time, it was zombies or nothing, which has kind of translated a little bit into, some of the weird stuff that we've been getting into recently. But, and then being a part of this community and being able to hang out and talk with you guys, on the Discord and on all the social media, it's opened my eyes even further to a lot of the horror stuff that's out there. So I think my favorite part about it is there's, no matter how much you think there's always something else that's, just behind the next table or closed door, to try and grasp your attention. So
it's growing. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so now that everybody's kind of wrapped up, what about you? What are the, what got you into horror, and what are your thoughts on the genre?
It's funny because when I think back to my personal earliest experience with horror, it wasn't actually like a movie or anything. There was this video store, and some of you guys, we've had these conversations before, so you might have heard this, but there was a video store that when I was really small, we used to go to. And they had like a kids section that was playing cartoons, and that's where all the kids' movies were, and like popcorn and stuff. And this was the 80s, right? So you'd go in and your parents would just the parents would park the kids in the kids section and leave them, and they would go pick out the adult movies, and the kids would pick out the movies. to sit there and watch cartoons, right? But in that movie store, in the back corner, they had this sectioned off area for horror. And there was like a black curtain, the way that you would picture like an X-rated section in an old movie store, but that's where they kept their horror movies. And when you would go inside, it was like the walls kind of looked like a castle, and there was like a black light, and they would have these statues dressed as like horror icons in the corners, like with all the movies in between, right? And I remember it was always this thing. Whenever they dropped me off, I would sit there with a little bag of popcorn, and as soon as they walked away, I would sneak around the back wall, then go to the little horror section and peek behind that curtain and get the crap scared out of me and run back to the cartoon section. But I did it every time, right? And they had right in the far corner was the statue of the Hell Priest from Hellraiser. And that image just haunted me. Like, and I'm talking from like, 3 to like 5 years old, not knowing, what movie it was from or anything. It was that. And then when I turned 6 is when I saw Monster Squad. And Monster Squad, I think, sold me on horror movies because it was like Goonies meets Universal Monsters, and it was my first exposure to like Dracula and the Wolfman and the Mummy, and I was so obsessed with those monsters that like almost instantly I wanted to know who they were and what movies they were from. And I could tell you I was probably the only 6-year-old in my school that was like my movie pick that week. My kid's movie pick was like the old Bela Lugosi black and white Dracula or the Boris Karloff Frankenstein, because I was obsessed with those monsters. And I got into Universal really, really, really young as far as like the monsters go. And that's where it all started for me. For my love of the franchise, I think once you hit a certain, point, especially I think most of us started watching horror movies pretty young, you kind of get desensitized. So it's not really about getting the scare, and then you start looking beyond the scare to like the nuances of horror movies, which I think is vastly overlooked in the industry. But like practical effects and creature creation and high concept, that stuff is one of my big things. And obviously, like everyone inside the community, we've said it before, growing up as a horror fan, you're always kind of like, you might have 1 or 2 friends that are kind of into it, but, you kind of feel like a little bit of an outcast and something you don't, no one wants to hear you talk about at family dinners or whatever. Just, people kind of eventually roll their eyes and like, okay. But when you're around horror fans, it's like everyone rides that same vibe and everyone's excited for more people to talk about it with. So I always find that really cool. It's one of the things I like about that genre.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps me up. Okay, guys, so for our show 0, we thought it would be fun to have a little round table just talking about our individual 3 favorite horror franchises. Not necessarily our top films, but franchises as a whole. So let's get into it. Gigi, what do you say your top 3 horror franchises are?
Oh, thanks, Kent. So, I gave this quite a bit of thought, actually. The Conjuring universe is definitely in my top 3. I don't know where it falls in my top 3, but it's definitely in there.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I just like the characters in it and the way they tell the stories. I think they do a really good job. The next one is Romero's Dead. So, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Diary. Yeah, I love them. I mean, seeing Dawn of the Dead as a kid is ingrained as like a critical memory.
Right.
So, and then
it's in the top shelf of the brain. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
It's like in the forehead. And then Alien, right. I love it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just an incredible franchise. I don't know. From the aliens themselves to Ripley. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. And there's like always this argument, like, is Alien horror or sci-fi, right? And there's definitely an argument for both. But even like Ridley Scott, in the first Alien, he was like, "This is a horror movie first and a sci-fi movie second, right?" Like, and the concept of it, I think, is super terrifying. So,
Well, it's one of the things
like,
about horror that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to completely cut you off.
no, you're good.
Just building on your thing, horror is like the only genre where if it's really good, people want to have it not be horror.
Yeah, right. Any argument to say it's not horror, right? No, it's
Exactly.
thriller. No, it's suspense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, get over it. It's
really
horror.
good, and it's horror.
Right.
But
Cool.
all right, well, thank you.
Anyone got anything to add to Gigi's? Okay, Jasper, what would you say your top 3 horror franchises are?
Okay, third is definitely Hell House LLC. I love every single one they bring out. You all know I'm a huge fan of found footage, so it's right up my alley, and it definitely gave me a big scare that I was looking for. My second would be Halloween. All the Halloweens, doesn't matter if it's the cheesy ones, I love them all.
Yeah.
And my first one would be, was it Sleepaway Camp?
Oh, yeah.
Is it Camp Sleepaway? I always get it mixed around.
Yeah. Like with Felicia Rose, like in the first one, like that whole franchise, right?
I actually have the box set sitting on my desk right now. I love the Sleepaway Camp movies. I think they're fantastic. So it's always kind of been a top. And I actually just recently rewatched them all again, and I really enjoyed it. Absolutely.
Classic. Yeah, I did the same thing. I did all sleepaway camps at some point in October, which was cool. Yeah, and there's talks of possibly like a 5th one coming. So
I would be so down for that. You know that I don't. They aren't serious movies. They're a bit fun. You can, and I've always enjoyed all of them, especially the kills. The kills are the best thing in those movies. For example, a lawnmower. Come on, that's great. I love that. I made my friends watch that, and they'd never seen a Sleepaway Camp movie, and they watched that scene, and they're like, "Oh my god!"
I love that.
Yeah. And then,
okay, Lena. Top 3.
Oh, damn, that's hard. I mean, my top 3 are very controversial, I'd say, because it's franchises that are well known, but they are also well known for fucking up a lot. So I think, to no surprise for anyone here, one of my favorites is the Saw franchise. I don't really know why, it just grew on me over time, and it's just the franchise I've been following the longest next to the Halloween franchise. The second one is going to be the Scream franchise. I love horror comedy, I love slasher. I think Scream still does it as one of the best. The original Scream is one of my favorite horror movies. And as third, that's really hard. I think it's going to be between the Halloween franchise, or the Fear Street thing, because I love the Fear Street books, and I recommend the movies, like the 3-part movies, to almost everyone that asks for horror movie recommendations. And if they haven't watched it, I recommend it to them because it's really easy to watch back to back, I think.
Very cool. Yeah, both Scream and Saw, I think, get a lot of flack, but like they've been around for so long, like ebbs and flows, right? Like some are better than others, but like there's no denying either one of those two, right? Like they've stood the test of time and have a huge fan base.
Definitely, and the fan base is like, yeah, we know some suck, but we stand by it. Like, we're very well aware of the quality of the movies, I think.
Right. Okay, Jarvis, top 3 horror franchises.
So I went with 2 franchises that were much very young, and I think that kind of helped define my viewings of horror. The number 3 goes to Reanimator.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which I think is the first time the first time I ever experienced body horror in a film. I was not expecting what I was gonna see in a film. Like, if you saw it without spoilers, the third act is like amazing body horror and amazing practical effects. Like, I can't even describe what happens in the third act, but if you watch the film, you know what I mean. And it was also my first introduction to Lovecraft, which became one of my favorite authors. So it's the first film, especially, is very special to me. But the franchise, a lot of people get flack for some of the sequels, but I really like the franchise. Number two goes to Evil Dead, and we had like the latest film in the franchise last year, and I freaking loved it. I think the franchise is in very good hands right now. And it's a franchise that I think inspires a lot of horror fans to
for sure
to make films. You know, I think they're
we just rewatched the first one on the Discord on Friday, right? Yeah, super influential for sure.
Yeah, that first film is one that if you're trying to make films and you wanna like try to make a horror film, that film is very like it's kind of an old school of how to make a film. And that's very inspiration to me. And the second one is one of the best films of all time, in my opinion. And I'm a sucker for the third one. I left my ass off for that film. I love the remake, and I love the last one. So it's almost a perfect franchise for me. And number one, I think you know what's coming, right? Right now, Ken, right? Universal Monsters.
Yeah. This is actually the franchise how you and I realized we were both horror fans.
That's right. Like that was the time when I was a kid that I saw all these films connect. That it's starting to blow my mind how these things work. You know, how these conjunctions and how these connections can make a franchise. And seeing the monsters interact, like Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and you know how the Frankenstein when Dracula controls the Wolfman, like. As a kid, seeing it's like you have a lot of toys and you see your toys interacting between one.
Right. No, I totally get that.
You know what I mean? It really leaves a mark on you. So it's a franchise that I always watch and I always come back to it. Never gets old, and it's on the top for me. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you can never go wrong with Universal Monsters, right? Like so classic, you know, right at the forefront of the horror industry. Yeah, it's a good list, man.
Every Halloween you have to put like black and white, you know, even the silent ones like Phantom of the Opera, it counts, you know. A lot of people say that doesn't, but it really counts.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Alright, see? What are your 3 favorite franchises? I think I could guess at least one.
Well, of course. So I gave this a lot of thought. And of course, number one favorite franchise of all time is going to be the Of the Dead. George Romero, 1968 through what I just learned this next year, right? We'll probably cover that later. But yeah, it was something about the Night of the Living Dead, the original 68. I was watching it in black and white, and minus the zombie aspect of it, and they're trapped in the house aspect of it. But at the end of the movie, and if I'm spoiling it 70 years later, I apologize. Right. But at the end of the movie, you're like, man, this dude is gonna make it. He, everything is great. His psyche, you can see the look of like relief in his face, and then he gets domed. That right there, it sold me on the entire franchise, and I've been a huge fan ever since. Number 2, oh yeah, it was great. It was, all of his movies have like that weird psychological aspect to it, I think, but that is what really, really got me going with it for sure. Number 2 would be Aliens, the Alien franchise. I haven't kept up with it quite as much as I would have liked, or I would like. But I think it's definitely one of the. There's a lot of noise going on in the background.
You're good.
I'm very excited for the There's a new Alien movie and Alien TV show in the works.
Yeah, the show looks good.
Oh, was it now? Is a movie or TV show called Romulus? Isn't that speculation of what it's going to be
I
called?
think Romulus is the movie.
Right. I'm very excited for it. I'm a huge fan of Alien as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'd say that would be my number 4, but we're only doing 3. So
It's so hard to rank them, right? Like I know when I was thinking of buying, I'm like, I'm just picking 3 that I love that I know no one else has.
I think I went by my most recent, mostly.
I think one of the other like great parts about that franchise is how they intermingled themselves with the Predator franchise, because you could throw both, you know, as their separate franchises, but then you have this weird collaboration where you also have the Alien versus Predator franchise kind of like in its own right. So
you know how that came about, eh?
I don't.
Alien mix. So the same company had the toy rights because the 80s were crazy and we made toys of R-rated movies. So the Kenner had the toy rights for both Aliens and Predator, and they were making toys. They crossed it over, right? Because why the hell not? They could do it if they wanted to, right? And that trickled into comics. And then shortly after, boom, we, well, maybe not so shortly, but soon after, we got the movie, and that's how they started, like, mixing those two universes.
Well, whoever was working on the line,
when we're like AVP movie, yes.
Yeah, whoever was working on the line and came up with that idea is underappreciated, I think.
Definitely.
And then the third that I picked for this, because it's one of my go-tos for sure, is the Freddy Krueger franchise. And I know it's kind of hit or miss with a lot of people just because it's a different type of horror for the time, I think. But what I resonate with the most is the psychological aspect of it, like when you really sit down and think of it, which is kind of altered my appreciation for a lot of movies that maybe I didn't like in the past. But when you really sit down and you kind of you put yourself in their shoes type of thing, that's always been so yeah,
it was super inventive. Like, there is no horror icon in the genre like Freddy Krueger, right? Like that is super ultra unique. And like, as a kid, I know you watch them now and they're like almost comical, but as a kid, that was terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. I make sure we watch at least 2 of them every Halloween for my kids so they can appreciate what true terror is.
For sure. Definitely.
But yeah, that wraps it up for my 3. Ken, what about you? What are your 3 favorite horror franchises?
So I picked and they are 3 of my favorite, but they were also
I progress one of these 2.
For my first 3 favorite horror franchises. So third would be the Puppet Master franchise by Full Moon, Charles Brand. Like, I've been obsessed with Puppet Master since I was a kid, which is weird because as an adult I have a weird fear of clowns and dolls. But, you put blades and, drill heads on them and all of a sudden I think they're adorable. So Puppet Master I watched way too young, sneaking out of the basement when the older kids were, watching horror movies. And I don't know, man, those little murder puppets were like superheroes to me. Like, I was obsessed with them to the point where I like got live scale prop replicas of the movies now as an adult. So I love that movie. Second would be the Pumpkinhead franchise. There's been no like super nothing new coming out, after like the initial 4. Most people don't even know that there's 4 of them, but there is something about the Pumpkinhead design, that Stan Winston creature design, that has been burned into my soul since I was like 6 or 7 years old. That creature and that concept, that like revenge demon curse thing, like that whole concept of Pumpkinhead I find amazing. And that first movie, and actually all of them have been really have been pretty good, and definitely movies that I watch on a regular. But that first one is so classic. Like, that is classic 80s, like, with heart kind of movie.
Right.
And again, that creature design, man, has just stuck with me forever. And
that's
my number one.
That's one of the greatest monsters of all time, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Ahead of their time.
I actually fear that what are you gonna do with it if they try to make it now? They're gonna make everything CGI. It's gonna kill a lot of the fun, you know.
I've given that some thought, and honestly, I would be down for either a reboot or a new one. And I say that as a hardcore, lifelong fan of the franchise. But my only caveat would be they would have to use that original Stan Winston design, right? And he's got his own school of creature design, right? Like, get students from that school to not make it new. We don't need anything revitalized. Just make a working model for film based on that design, and put some heart and soul into it, and I'd be supportive of it. See, you were trying to say something there. Sorry, man, you got cut off.
Oh no, I was just saying that the special effects that they had, it was the 80s, so they didn't have all the cool computer stuff that we have nowadays. But it just, whatever they were able to accomplish, I think was far ahead of its time. It was similar in a lot of right to a lot of the things that were coming out around that time, but just the way they, their cinematography and the way that the creature looked, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was brilliant, and I love that Dan Winston got to direct that movie, because like, he's created some of the most iconic creatures that we know as like horror and sci-fi fans. And like, the fact that he actually got to not only create Pumpkinhead but bring the vision of the film to life behind the director's seat, I absolutely love. And my number one is no surprise to anyone. It was the first horror icon to ever scare me as like a 3-4-year-old. Still my favorite horror franchise to this day. Number 1 and 2 are still my favorite horror movies. That's the Hellraiser franchise. And I cannot say how much, I cannot overstate how much I love Clive Barker and like the worlds he creates. And the concept of the Cenobites, like, from the book. So, like, I fell in love with this franchise from the movies as a kid, being terrified of them. But that whole concept, and growing up and reading the book that started it all, The Hellbound Heart, which is still my favorite book, and just kind of digging more and more into that world, even behind the films, I just think is amazing. It's my favorite, overarching story, I think, in cinema. And there's really not much I don't like about it. I like all the movies, like even the super trash ones that were thrown together by the studio that just had to do something with it, you know what I mean? And put anything with Cenobites in it, I can sit down and enjoy. And even if the movie and a few of them, like, I get it. They are trash, some of them. But even those trash ones, I find something to enjoy, because my head's spinning the wheels behind and whatever I'm seeing, and just those images and that concept I love. And I think the first 4, I know a lot of people only really like the first 2. I'm a big fan of the first 4 the most. I think they're perfect. The first film is a masterpiece on that budget. If you guys ever get the inkling to just throw on the first Hellraiser movie, there are some scenes in that, and if you find the budget to what they filmed that movie with, and it is mind-blowing what they accomplished, how they brought that vision to life. It was changed a little bit from the book. A lot of it is word for word, but there were some concepts that were changed. And what they were able to accomplish in that movie, I thought, was amazing. But as a franchise, it's the whole concept of it that I'm just blown away by. I'm a big fan of everything Clive has done, but Hellraiser by far is number 1. That's me.
Your list, it makes a lot of sense, especially Hellraiser. I gotta say, from knowing you, it makes total sense. But I am surprised that Terrifier didn't make it onto your list.
Oh, I love the Terrifier movies, but if I'm going with top franchises, I've got to go with the ones that got me into horror, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like 80s kid, right? Like those were the things that were like huge. And I knew Jarvis was going to be like Universal Monsters. I knew that, when these questions popped up. So I'm like, because those would be super high on my list as well, right? like as far as a franchise goes. But yeah, no, those were my first three favorite, and all three of them have stuck with me my whole life. And like especially in horror conversations and stuff, and in communities, like those are the three things that like in a horror community when we like a lot of the same stuff. Those are the three franchises that can easily define me, right? So yeah, those are mine. Okay, guys. All right, cool. And our co-host tonight, C, is also co-owner and operator of the Wither Network. C, do you want to give our audience a quick rundown of the Wither universe?
Absolutely. So to take it back, me and a guy that I served with, you can catch him on the Wither server on Discord. We started trying to figure out ways to kind of cope with military service and the things that you kind of encounter during that, some of the hardships that you have. So we started writing a book. Had no plans to do anything with it. We gave it to a couple beta readers, and they gave us a lot of really good feedback. So we ended up taking that idea, creating the Wither Network, which is the business that we own, which kind of encompasses the Wither universe that we're creating. So we started it off with our first feature-length novel, which is about 650 pages long. It published October 31st of 2021, and it's called Wither, a Zombie Novel. So since that is launched, we've kind of adjusted our business model a little bit because we both have a desire to give back to communities of, either underserved populations of people, whether it's the homeless, whether it's military veterans who have been wounded, or their Gold Star families. And we've started getting into the realm of doing some like anti-trafficking stuff as well. So a lot of what we do, the proceeds we get help fund some of those nonprofit organizations. So one of the cool projects that we just finished up this last year was what we're calling the Wither Chronicles. The one that is out right now is called Wither Chronicles Volume 1, which most of you are very familiar with, which is an anthology of 16 authors who were able to create their own story within our universe, where all of the stories were provided free of charge. The publishing and the editing was done free. The cover art was done free by none other than Jasper in here. And the goal for this project was to give 100% back, or 100% profit of everything that we get, back to these communities. And that's going off really, really well right now. And it kind of ties into our theme, our co-theme, if you will, which is we want it to be a community-driven experience, right? So the people who are a part of this core group and those who join later have the opportunity to kind of help mold and shape the way the universe grows, which I think is pretty unique in most creative aspects that I've ever seen. So that just finished up this last year, October 31st. We published that book, and at the end of this year, we'll be able to provide all of those funds to the organizations that we're talking about. The organization that we've given everything to is called We Are the Dead, which is a sub-organization of a organization called Flanders Foundry, which is, for military veterans specific. But the group that we decided to go with they're not veteran focused, but they do help veterans. But so they're more, homeless or underserved people across the world.
It's really good charity.
So we didn't want to limit ourselves too much on this first run because, the Wither Chronicles Volume 1 has authors from, I think it was 6 different countries.
Right.
So, we wanted to be able to try and give back globally if we can, and that organization is really good for that.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And then, we've got a bunch of projects coming up in 2024 that we're really, really excited about. That, hopefully as we continue to do these, we'll be able to provide some updates and some insight on what we got going.
For sure. No, I love it. So right now we've got Wither, a Zombie Novel. We've got the Wither Chronicles. These are already out on available on Amazon and other sources, right?
Yep.
And on your website.
And on our
we've
website.
got the Discord, the community Discord, which is fantastic. I think all of us here are members of that Discord as well. The tabletop game in development right now, Wither Universe tabletop D&D style game.
Yeah, so we've been developing that for about 9 or 10 months now, and about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, we just finished the first session of the full campaign to kind of proof of concept everything, and yeah, that'll be hopefully, fingers crossed, June of 2024.
The concept is super good. The ultra realistic zombie apocalypse like D&D game for people who aren't into the fantasy stuff. You know what I mean? Like to dive into that, I think is a super cool concept. What else? Lots of swag, right? Sweaters and stuff. Where can the people find you and all the links to your stuff?
Yeah, so we're on every social media there is: Instagram, X, Slasher, Facebook. It's all Wither Novels. And then our website is witheruniverse.com. And on there, it has links to where you can, purchase any of the books that are out. The t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, all that stuff is on there as well. So anybody can check all that stuff out there.
Right on. Perfect. All right. Thanks, Steve. And thanks, everyone, to anyone who saw our little tag and clicked on to see what we're all about. We appreciate you all. We hope you were entertained and come back and join us for the next one. And to my co-host, thank you so much. It's been a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Guys.
Great time.
Have a good night.